I'm Szczepanek, this is Pianist Academy, and today we're talking through 4 new pieces for one hand, just composed by Frederick, who's a great friend of this channel. These 4 pieces are part of the new ABRSM syllabus for 2025, and they span grades 1 and 2. Now, I've already posted performances of all of these pieces on the channel, and you can find links to those down below in the description. So in this video, we're going to discuss the value of learning repertoire for one hand, and we're going to look in detail at a couple of these 4 pieces. We're also going to hear some thoughts from the composer himself a bit later in the video. First off, these 4 pieces: Sandcastles, Night Wishes, Mirror Dance, and Sea Tales. They are grade 1 and 2 repertoire in the ABRSM syllabus, but there are many reasons that even if you're beyond these levels in your study, you might consider revisiting some easier repertoire. Now, to be completely frank, and the reason why I use air quotes is because no music at any level is truly easy to play well and to play musically. In my private lessons that I teach, I regularly use music that's far below the level that a student may have accomplished so that we can work on perfecting some other aspects of learning and performance that often don't get the attention that they deserve when the focus might be on extending technical capabilities instead. For example, how many of you out there, even if you've passed a grade 7 or 8 ABRSM exam, how many of you have ever played anything for one hand only? The answer is probably few to none of you, and that's partially to do with the fact that most repertoire for one hand written by the great composers is quite advanced. And that leads us right into talking about why repertoire for one hand, especially music that's not so advanced, is a really important facet of study for the developing pianist. Let's take a look at Night Wishes. This is one of the new pieces by Frederick. Here is a little of how this piece sounds and plays in its left-hand version. Okay, that was the first 2 lines. How many of the intricacies did you catch in this piece? Did you catch that we have sustained pitches in the top texture? Did you catch that we have detached notes in the bottom texture? I'm using textures. Did you catch that there were 2 textures? There is melody on the top and there is accompaniment on the bottom. Did you catch that? Did you catch all of these different slurs where we need to fall into or lean into the first note of the slur and release the second? Did you catch the longer slur here, where, yes, it's connected, but still with a release before we land on the final note of the phrase? And then, did you catch that the opposite side of the hand, that was all done with the thumb side of the left hand, the opposite side of the hand, the 4 and 5 side, has another phrase. And not only does it have another phrase, but it has that phrase while the main melody sustains. No, those are a lot of technical things, of course, but underneath that is that we really have 3 different things going on here. A melody that has one type of intention. We have an accompaniment, kind of pulsing, with a different intention. And then we have a counter melody that's a whole nother thing unto itself. I've said on this channel many times that a deeper understanding of music can come from, at least in part, understanding textures used in music. Now, too often, especially in early grade levels, the left hand gets relegated to some chunky chord work, like throw in a 5/7, or if we even break it up. That happens so often, and maybe while that's happening, the right hand gets a lyrical line of some kind. But for many students, playing and studying too much repertoire that's like this and chunky, yeah, too much of that closes us off to the idea that really both hands are equal at the keyboard. And they're going to need to be equal as you desire to play more and more advanced repertoire. And beyond that, often one hand needs to be able to express more than one simple idea, like we just pointed out here in this piece. In single-handed repertoire, we need to be able to handle at least 2 tasks with one hand. Even in this grade 1 piece, one hand should be able to play a melodic line and simultaneously also the accompanimental line and show them as being very different from one another. As opposed to if we didn't show that they were different. Right? You hear that difference. And then this piece gives us an example of not even just 2 separate things, but when Frederick throws in that counter melody at the end of the first line, well, now we have 3 different things happening in just one hand. So are you starting to see why, even though the notes and the rhythms may be fairly straightforward for this grade 1 piece, the very independent control that you'll need with all 5 fingers and in just one hand, and how you use the fingers and the wrist and the arm, it can make this piece strikingly challenging. And another thing, often in advanced repertoire for one hand, you need to be able to incorporate lots of sustain pedal in order to connect ideas while one hand is flying around the keyboard back and forth, upper texture, middles, and low bass. These pieces by Frederick give us an opportunity to work on 2 really important skills. The first is a lot of what we just talked about, close observation of the score, learning about finger sustain and release and slurs, and even forearm rotation to aid those things, convincing the listener of at least 2 separate textures, but with just one hand. And most importantly, for right now in our discussion, doing all of that with no pedal. But additionally, one-handed repertoire gives us a great opportunity to explore how to add pedal to a piece like this in a tasteful way that doesn't blur the component parts of the composition too much, but can add, not just sustain, making some of these aspects easier to connect, but it also, we can learn how to hear how the color of our playing can change when pedal is added. Let me play you a quick example of this again. I'm going to play the first line without pedal to start with, just to refresh what that sounds like, and then immediately I'll follow that up with a with pedal demonstration so you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. So without pedal. And now with pedal. Right? You hear those differences. The with pedal is more tonally, harmonically complex. The color of the sound we're producing is more complex. Learning how to do that with the pedal at an early grade level, oh gosh, that is such a valuable skill. The pedal is not just an on and off tool for us. It doesn't just sustain notes, but there is so much detail in how we use it. And this is a wonderful opportunity to start diving into that. Or especially, let's say you are well beyond grade 1 in your playing and you'd like to work on this and you'd like to add a little bit more complexity. Well, can you play these with both no pedal and with pedal? And can you articulate everything just exactly how you want to? Because of the importance of both of those facets of playing, with pedal and without pedal, on every recording of these pieces that I've made for you here on the channel, I played a no pedal version and a with pedal version for you to study. The no pedal demonstrations are always at the beginning of those videos, and the with pedal demonstrations are always at the end. And as I mentioned earlier, links to all of those performance videos are down below in the description of this video right here. As we come off of talking about the importance of pedal and no pedal, it's worth noting that the mirror dance that Frederick wrote is specifically a piece that should not be treated with pedal. The slurs and staccato marked in this piece necessitate it being played only with the hand. All right, let's take a quick break from looking at this music and hear instead what ABRSM says on their website about repertoire for one hand. They say, one-handed repertoire opens up piano playing for people with a range of upper limb differences and impairments. For example, as a result of cerebral palsy, stroke, Poland syndrome, and other conditions. It also allows students who have temporarily lost use of their arm or hand to continue playing. It might also be helpful for a student who needs to concentrate on their technique for one hand more than the other, or could be an activity that's enjoyable just because it's a new experience. I think the inclusivity and making music study at the piano more accessible to many who otherwise wouldn't even be able to consider playing the piano, I think that's an amazing step forward in music education, and I really hope the other exam boards take note and follow what ABRSM is doing here. So earlier we looked at Night Wishes for the left hand, but 3 of the 4 pieces that Frederick has just written are scored for either the left hand or the right hand only. I've pulled up Sandcastles. This is a grade 2 piece by Frederick, but here I'm showing the right hand version. If I page back and forth between the left hand and the right hand version, you'll notice the piece is exactly the same. It's even in the same register on the keyboard, but the fingerings for the left hand and the right hand are different. You're going to really want to pay attention to them. The fingering suggestions in all of these pieces have been very thoughtfully considered, and when you're playing repertoire for a single hand, there usually isn't a whole lot of leeway in choosing alternate fingerings because the pieces need the hand and the fingers to be used in a very specific way in order to execute everything the way the composer intended. Let's quickly visit Sea Tales. This is the 4th piece by Frederick, and it's the only one that we haven't touched on today. This is also the only piece of these 4 that's written just for left hand, without a complementary right hand version. Now, of course, all the things that we talked about in detail in Night Wishes, they all still exist here. But there's one additional component that I have to mention. So if we look toward the end of Sea Tales, of course, in all of these pieces, we've already mentioned that there is a melodic texture and an accompanimental texture, and sometimes more. What we didn't talk about is how in the other pieces, those textures happen at different points in time, or our articulation of the notes that belong to different textures happen at different points in time. In the other piece, Night Wishes, we had melody alternating with accompaniment. Even though there are notes that sustain across one another, we have different moments in time to make those different intentions, different dynamics between the textures, different colors. We have time to make that happen, and we can use the hand to aid in that and how we articulate those. However, in Sea Tales, the Meno Mosso, we have something really great. First of all, the melody is in the bottom of the hand, and if I play a little bit of leading up to this for you, from measure 25, right? The melody is in the bottom, not on the top. The accompaniment is on the top. That presents a really interesting challenge at the measures that I just circled. And that is the melody is, which is not the thumb side of the hand. Most often, when a student plays this, they're going to play this. And the thumb and the second finger are going to play far more forcefully than we truly desire. But what we want is the third finger. The third finger is the one playing this A. We want that third finger to be the one that's brought out. So you can hear how 3 is voiced up. It's a higher dynamic to draw attention to the melody. Same thing in the bar following. Here it happens with the 4th finger. That is such a great thing to expose a student to at grade 2. Oh my gosh. And it's far more difficult to do that well than most grade 2 students are going to be able to show us. but just to get us thinking and listening for that, listening for how we can voice the different fingers in different ways, even when they're played simultaneously. Right? That is something that could present a really difficult challenge for many pianists, even beyond grade 2. But I'm so happy that Frederick threw it in this piece. It's just another great thing about this set of 4 pieces that brings to light and gives us opportunities as teachers to talk about so many extra things as we teach our beginner students of whatever age more about what it is to make music and how we use the hands at the piano to do that. Let's take a moment and hear from Frederick himself.
Hello, I'm Frederick Viner, composer, pianist and teacher based in the northeast of England. Over the last year, I've been lucky enough to work with ABRSM, developing a number of pieces ranging from ukulele music to single-handed piano music. Now, a lot of pianists are aware of Ravel's Piano Concerto, the Godowsky Studies for one hand, or Blumenfeld Etude, but not a lot of this music is actually playable. So that was the challenge set by ABRSM. Can you write a grade 1 or a grade 2 piece for one hand, either left or right hand? And this is a rather wonderful challenge for a composer, because it's all well and good writing for Nicholas McCarthy, for example, who can do more with one hand than most pianists can do with 2. Can you write a musically satisfying, technically accessible piece just for one hand, and maybe even just the span of a 5th or a 6th if it's a child playing, for example? That's the challenge, and without sounding too smug, I'm reasonably happy with the result. So there are 4 pieces in total: Sandcastles, Night Wishes, Mirror Dance, and Sea Tales. The first piece, Sandcastles, can be played by the left or right hand alone, but to be completely honest, I was thinking of the left hand in particular. That's why the melody is at the top, which is where your thumb is, and that's especially satisfying and natural, I think. I think the best way to sum up this piece would be bittersweet. Sweet, because the tune is essentially a descending major triad. Bitter, because of that diminished 5th that lurks towards the end of each phrase, based on the Lydian mode. And anyone who knows me knows that I love a good Lydian mode. It's basically my cheat code to inventing nice melodies and chord progressions. Another thing to note about this piece is that it sort of sets up the atmosphere for the following pieces. It includes a lot of the same pianistic shapes and some of the same kind of harmonic shifts. For example, that unexpected E-flat major chord towards the end is sort of foreshadowing similar harmonic twists in the pieces to come. Night Wishes is the second piece, and like the first, the melody sits on top so that it's easily accessible to either the thumb or pinky, to fingers which are kind of accustomed to playing melodies. And again, like Sandcastles, there are these slightly unexpected harmonic twists and turns, which I'm quite fond of. The title, like most of my titles, to be honest, came at the very end. I will have finished the piece, and I'm scratching my head, desperately trying to come up with a title, desperately trying to resist the urge to use ChatGPT. But an image that was kind of in my mind was Mike Flanagan's series on Netflix. So that'll be either Midnight Mass or The House of... forgotten the name. Maybe someone can comment the name. It's very, very good, very, very scary. But yeah, a kind of creepy, gothic, but also hopefully beautiful piece. The third piece is Mirror Dance, and stands out probably amongst the 4 in that it has the least harmony. There's kind of a solo line in the main section, which is then harmonized a little bit in the middle. I think it's kind of channeling my obsession with Mahler, which doesn't really find an outlet in my piano music very often, but it's got this Viennese 3 dancey feeling, I think, which comes through. I can tell you that ABRSM rejected the original title, which was Doppelganger. So what do you think? Doppelganger, Mirror Dance. I think they're both good. I think Doppelganger is better. The final piece is Sea Tales, and it's probably the most difficult piece because the melody is at the bottom of the texture, meaning you're relying on your weaker fingers to play it. And so to voice this melody, to actually execute a convincing legato, requires fairly developed control of those weaker fingers. Structurally, it's very simple. You hear the tune, then you hear the tune again, a bit lower and a little bit louder. And again, just like the previous pieces, this one also contains slightly surprising harmonic progressions, specifically D minor, B minor, two chords which aren't usually associated within the same key, which kind of links back to the first piece and brings a unity to the set.
I really hope that this dive into single-handed repertoire that Frederick Weiner has just composed opens your eyes to the benefits of learning one-handed repertoire, especially in the earlier stages of learning. I hope you enjoy these pieces, and if you haven't heard them, remember, video performances of them are linked down below in the description. And remember that 3 of these 4 could be played with either the left hand or the right hand, and they present unique and different challenges depending on which hand you choose to perform the piece or learn the piece. I've also included links to purchase any of these 4 pieces that you'd like. I've also linked here to the ABRSM website for piano, where you can explore finding even more repertoire for just one hand. I can definitely, with certainty, say that I'm going to be using these pieces with my own students. I'm Charles Szczepanek. You've been watching Pianist Academy, where we make elite piano concepts simple to understand. If you enjoyed this content and you want to take your piano playing to the next level, check out my Thinkific page. I've got beginner, intermediate, and advanced masterclasses on some of my favorite pieces of music. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Practice smarter, not harder, and I'll see you next time.